Families don't usually detonate in a single moment, but mine did, and I should recognize the fuse the second I stepped through the door. If you've ever arrived at a holiday gathering and felt something was waiting for you, something everyone else knew but wouldn't say, you'll understand the atmosphere. I walked into that Thanksgiving. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Warm lights glowing through the hallways, cinnamon and turkey drifting from the kitchen, relatives chatting over clinking glasses. It should have felt like home, but instead it felt staged, like a set built for a play I hadn't been invited to rehearse for. Mom greeted me first, arms tight around me, her perfume sweet but unfamiliar, as if she'd chosen something special for the occasion. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Dad followed with a stiff nod, the kind he gives strangers he's not sure he should trust. And then there was Jenna, radiant, polished, floating around the house as if she were hosting the event instead of just attending it. She kept tucking her hair behind her ear, adjusting the necklace she always wears when she wants extra attention, moving with the kind of rehearsed confidence that immediately put my nerves on edge. I found my seat at the dining table and noticed something immediately. The chair that always sat beside mine, the one my grandmother usually used, was missing. Not moved or replaced. Gone. It shouldn't have bothered me, but in my family, small disappearances always preceded big decisions nobody wanted to discuss. Growing up, Jenna and I had been close in the way sisters often are, sharing secrets under blankets, borrowing each other's clothes, whispering about boys and school. But when adolescence hit, our paths split. She stepped easily into the spotlight our parents kept ready for her, collecting praise like it was her birthright. I learned how to survive in the shadows, how to build my own life without waiting for approval that was never coming. My choice to move to Chicago, something I saw as independence, became in my parents' eyes an act of betrayal. Meanwhile, Jenna stayed, making herself indispensable to them, reinforcing the quiet hierarchy we all pretended didn't exist. Still, I returned every holiday, mostly for my grandmother, Evelyn. She was the only one who greeted me with genuine affection, brushing her cool hand against my cheek and whispering something encouraging before slipping back into the background. She never played favorites. She simply saw me. But that Thanksgiving even she studied me, with the sharpness of someone anticipating a fall that I hadn't been warned about. Conversations dimmed whenever I walked near. People would laugh too loudly when I passed, only to go silent again, like they were editing their lines on the fly. I brushed it off at first. Old habits of pretending everything was fine, but something prickled beneath the surface. The unease wasn't imagined. It was orchestrated. I didn't know the exact shape of what was coming, but every instinct in my body told me I was sitting at a table that wasn't meant for me anymore. And if I had any doubt about that, the announcement my sister made moments later would shatter it completely. Jenna didn't tap her glass gently. She smacked the side of it with her ring like she was announcing a promotion, not a secret. The chatter around the table softened, then stopped, all eyes shifting toward her as she rose from her seat. She looked like she'd been waiting for that exact moment all night, hair curled just right, dress sparkling under the chandelier, our grandmother's necklace catching the light like some kind of blessing. "I have an announcement," she said, grinning so wide it almost looked painful. "Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me. I'm going to be the new owner." She paused deliberately, then added with a half-laugh, "Emily gets nothing?" The room erupted. Cheers, whistles, claps. A few people even raised their glasses as she'd just gotten engaged. Someone yelled, "Finally!" Another relative gave my dad a proud slap on the back. Mom dabbed the corner of her eye with her napkin like she was overwhelmed with joy. I didn't clap. I didn't flinch. I just sat there with my hand resting on my fork, feeling the familiar pressure in my chest that comes when people mistake cruelty for a joke. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't look silent at all. It lives beneath the noise, under the congratulations and the laughter. That was where I was sitting. I looked at Jenna, radiant, glowing, oblivious. And I pictured the folder in my bag, the papers, the numbers, the truth. I set my fork down gently, the soft clink somehow louder than the applause. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice even. "Do you want to tell them, or should I?" The shift was instant. It was like someone sliced through the celebration with a knife. Applause died mid-clap. Conversations cut off. The only sound for a second was the tick of the old radiator in the corner. Dad's face drained of color. His hand slipped, his fork rattling against his plate. Mom's smile flattened, eyes darting between us like she was trying to decide whether to scold me or plead with me. Jenna's expression twisted, confusion flashing before irritation. "Tell them what?" she asked, her tone sharp, defensive. To understand what I meant, to understand why my question landed like a grenade, you'd have to go back 6 months, to a Saturday in June when my phone rang, and Mom's number lit up my screen. "Sweetheart," she'd said, voice saccharine, "we really need you to come home for something important, just for the day." No details. No explanation. Just urgency wrapped in sweetness, which in my family has always been a warning. I drove back that weekend, thinking maybe it was about my grandmother, or some health scare, or even a big family decision they actually wanted me involved in. Instead, they led me straight to the dining table, the same table we were now sitting at, and laid out a neat stack of papers like it was a business proposal. Dad cleared his throat, wearing a strained version of his everything's fine face. "It's just some refinancing stuff for the house," he said. "Better rate, lower payments, routine paperwork. We just need your signature. Nothing for you to worry about." Even then, something in me recoiled. I didn't know it yet, but that stack of routine papers was less a favor and more a trap, and I was never supposed to see the teeth hidden inside it. I remember flipping through the stack of papers that June afternoon, each page feeling heavier than the last. There were too many forms, too many figures that didn't quite line up, and far too many explanations that sounded rehearsed. Dad kept tapping the table with his finger, a nervous habit he only had when he was hiding something. Mom hovered behind him, her smile stretched too tight, like she was willing it to hold everything together. "Can I take these with me?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "I'd like my lawyer to look them over." Silence. A thick, strangling kind of silence. Mom's smile wobbled. Dad snapped the folder shut quicker than I expected, like a man realizing he'd shown a card he didn't mean to reveal. "It's just a formality," he said, voice firming. "Why make this complicated?" But he didn't stop me from taking the folder, not really. Maybe he thought I'd never follow through. Maybe he believed I'd sign out of guilt, like I had so many times before in smaller ways. Back in Chicago, I dropped the stack on my lawyer's desk. Her eyebrows rose almost immediately. She didn't even make it halfway through before she closed the folder and looked up at me. "This isn't a refinance," she said. "They're trying to transfer liability." "Liability?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. "What liability?" She tapped the page in front of her. "Your parents have a second mortgage they're behind on. Significant debt. If you sign this, you take responsibility for all of it." I felt the room tilt slightly. The air seemed to thicken. "What debt?" I whispered. "Overdue notices, missed payments, foreclosure warnings, all tucked behind pages of legal jargon." I walked out of her office with the folder held like it was something alive and dangerous. I didn't call my parents right away. I needed time to let the betrayal settle. But I didn't get much time. 2 months later, Dad called me again, this time asking for money outright. Not a loan. Not temporary help. Just money. It's for your mother's medical bills, he said. But when I offered to pay the hospital directly, he cracked. The truth slipped out in pieces. Late payments, rising interest, desperation scratching at the edge. They weren't being swallowed by a moment of bad luck. They were drowning in decisions they had hidden from me for years. And now, sitting at the Thanksgiving table with Jenna glowing under the spotlight, it was painfully clear. They weren't giving her the house. They were giving her everything attached to it: the debt, the danger, the years of unpaid consequences. And they expected me to sit quietly while they packaged ruin as a gift. I reached into my bag and felt the edge of the folder, its weight steady and cold. I didn't plan to humiliate them. I planned to prevent them from sacrificing Jenna the same way they tried to sacrifice me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for how fast the truth would unravel once I finally laid it on the table. When Jenna demanded, "Tell them what?" I could see the first crack of fear in her expression, thin but unmistakable. She wasn't used to being left out of the script. She'd walked into Thanksgiving expecting applause, celebration, her perfect moment. The last thing she expected was me, quiet, dependable Emily, reaching for a folder she didn't know existed. I laid the folder on the table. Slowly. Deliberately. The room leaned in with me. Before I opened it, I said, "Before you all celebrate Jenna getting the house, you should know the condition it's really in." Dad stepped forward like he could physically stop the words from forming. "Emily," he warned. But warnings meant nothing anymore. I opened the folder and slid the first page toward the center of the table. The summary of overdue payments stared up at everyone. Cold, blunt, undeniable. "They're months behind," I said. "On 2 mortgages." A few relatives gasped. My Aunt Diane's fork clattered against her plate. Jenna blinked rapidly. "What are you talking about?" "The house is paid off," they told me. "They didn't tell you about the second mortgage," I said softly. "Or the foreclosure notices, or the debt that's been growing for years." Dad's jaw clenched. Mom's eyes filled instantly, her face crumpling in a way that once upon a time might have made me soften. "Not anymore." "That's not true," Jenna snapped, her voice cracking. "It can't be." I slid the next page toward her, a notice stamped in red. She looked at it like it was written in another language. "You were never being gifted the house," I said. "You were being handed their debt. They tried to get me to sign for it first. When that didn't work, they turned to you." The truth hit her in stages. Shock, confusion, then betrayal blooming across her face like a bruise. Her fiancé, Tyler, shifted beside her, his expression hardening. "They told me everything was fine," he said, staring at my father. "You looked me in the eye and told me the house was yours free and clear." My father didn't respond. Tyler stood abruptly. "You expect us to start our life together on top of a financial sinkhole?" His voice shook, not from weakness but from rage. Jenna reached for him, but he stepped back. "Tyler, please. I didn't know." "I believe you," he said. "But I'm not marrying into this." He turned and walked out, past the silent relatives, past the untouched food, past the front door, without another word. Jenna collapsed into her chair like the air had been punched out of her. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her hands trembling on the tablecloth. Dad slammed his palm down. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You ruined everything when you tried to make your children pay for your decisions." The murmurs around us grew. Judgment, disbelief, anger. Not at me. At them. My grandmother stood slowly, her gaze leveled at my father. "I raised you better than this," she said quietly. "Your daughters are not lifeboats. The shame on his face was a language I'd waited years to see him understand. But the night wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because just when I thought the truth had hit its peak, a knock at the door proved there was still more coming. The knock hit the door like a warning shot, sharp, deliberate, and completely out of place in the stunned silence hanging over the dining room. Every head turned. Even Jenna, crumpled and shaking in her chair, lifted her eyes toward the something. The knock came again, louder this time. My father wiped his face with a trembling hand. Who is that? No one moved at first. Then my Aunt Diane stood and opened the door. A woman stepped inside, mid-40s, hair pulled neatly back, wearing a plain gray suit and holding a folder. A badge clipped to her belt glinted under the hallway light. She wasn't the type who showed up for holiday pleasantries. And Mrs. Nolan?" she asked, scanning the room before landing her gaze on my parents. "My name is S. Harper. I need to speak with you regarding discrepancies in your mortgage and financial records." The room erupted, not with cheers this time, but with stunned, horrified whispers. My mother's legs nearly buckled. My father went pale as bone. Jenna's hand flew to her mouth, her voice a small, cracked whisper. What is happening?" I didn't move. I didn't need to. The truth had simply followed the trail they'd laid. Mom stumbled toward the investigator, hands shaking. This must be some kind of mix-up. We're in the middle of a family dinner." Mess. Harper was unmoved. "This will only take a few minutes. We received a report indicating possible financial misconduct, and I need clarification on several items." Dad shot me a look, blaming, panicked, cornered. "Emily," he hissed. "What did you do?" "I told the truth," I replied. "Something you should have tried." Relatives began shifting away from my parents, instinctively widening the space around them. It was the social version of stepping back from a fire. "Yes." Harper opened her folder. "According to the records, you applied for a second mortgage without disclosing prior liabilities. Several payments appear to be in default. We also have concerns about attempts to transfer ownership under conditions that may constitute fraud." My mother burst into tears. Loud, jagged sobs that echoed in the room. My father sank into his chair, shoulders sagging as if years of secrets finally decided to sit on top of him. Jenna looked destroyed. Not crying. Not yelling in. Just hollow, like someone drained her from the inside out. My grandmother moved behind her and rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was the only kindness in the room that didn't feel forced or fragile. The investigator continued asking questions, calmly, professionally, while my parents stumbled through half-truths, excuses, and deflections. Each answer made the walls feel closer, the air heavier. No one touched their food. No one dared interrupt. When S. Harper finally closed her folder, she said, "We will follow up soon. I recommend you gather all your documents and respond promptly to future inquiries." Then she stepped out, leaving the door slightly ajar behind her, as if the house itself needed a breath of fresh air. For a moment, nobody spoke. Not a single sound. Finally, Mom looked at me through swollen eyes. "Emily, tell them you misunderstood, please. Tell them it was a mistake." But there was nothing left to misunderstand. And even then, I had no idea just how much fallout was waiting for all of us once the dust settled and reality hit full force. The door clicked shut behind Miss Harper, and the house felt smaller, like the walls had crept inward while she was speaking. No one reached for their food. No one dared breathe too loudly. The truth had been laid bare, and nothing could shove it back into the shadows where my parents had tried to keep it. Dad stared at the table, as if the wood grain might rewrite the facts for him. Mom clutched her napkin with white-knuckled desperation, tears streaking down her face. I felt no triumph, only a quiet, exhausted clarity. Some truths don't set you free. They simply stop you from being dragged under. "I can't believe you did this," Dad said finally, his voice rough and cracking. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone." I looked at him for a long moment. "I didn't embarrass you, your choices did. I just stopped carrying them for you." He flinched like I'd struck him. Mom reached out, her hand trembling in the air between us. "Emily, please. Stay. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said. "Not until you start telling the truth. To yourselves, to Jenna, to everyone." Jenna hadn't spoken since the investigator left. She sat slumped in her chair, mascara smudged down her cheeks, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap until it tore. When she finally lifted her head, her voice was barely audible. "What do I do now?" It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was the voice of someone whose world had fallen apart and was only now realizing it was built on borrowed stability. For the first time in a long time, I looked at her, not as the golden child, not as the favorite, but as my little sister, the girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. I sat beside her. "You start fresh, without their secrets on your shoulders." Her eyes glistened. Are you going to leave?" "I'm not leaving you," I said gently. "Just their lies." My grandmother approached, slow but steady, and placed a hand on my back. "Good girl," she murmured, the pride in her voice a balm I didn't realize I still needed. The relatives began gathering their things quietly, whispering apologies to Jenna, shooting my parents looks of disappointment and disbelief. One by one, they slipped out the door, leaving the Nolans' once perfect Thanksgiving in ruins. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. The house went up for sale. My parents had no choice. The debt was too deep, the consequences unavoidable. They moved into a small apartment across town, stripped of their illusions. For the first time in my life, they didn't lecture me, guilt-trip me, or try to shape me into someone convenient. They were simply quiet. Jenna started therapy. She called me often, sometimes to cry, sometimes to sit in silence, sometimes just to remind herself she wasn't alone. For the first time, she questioned the pedestal our parents had kept her on, realizing it had been a trap disguised as privilege. As for me, I learned the hardest truth of all. Telling the truth is not betrayal. Protecting secrets that destroy you is. And families built on denial don't shatter in a single moment. They crumble long before the collapse. I just finally stopped pretending not to see it. So, if you've ever stood alone at a table surrounded by people who claim to love you, but choose comfort over honesty, trust me, you're not alone. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to be the one who finally flips the lights on.